Okay, for Kinah Yud, number 10, I'm going to try to give a little bit of explanation to just 2 lines. About 2 decades ago, I was in Neve Yaakov, and I heard a shiur from Rabbi Kaganoff. I don't know if it was a shiur or if it was during the actual Tisha B'Av. He was explaining the Kinos, explaining the differences in the Kinos between, for example, the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim. I didn't realize there was a difference. He said that the Ashkenazim, like the Kinos from Elazar HaKalir, which were incredibly complicated, incredibly deep and meaningful, but very difficult to understand. He quoted Rabbi Ibn Ezra, who disagrees with using them and says you're supposed to understand the Kinos, you're supposed to understand what you're saying, and so he basically outlawed them and said instead you should say the Kinos, or the Piyutim of Rav Saadia Gaon, which were much easier to understand. Until that time I thought, okay, we are going to read something that we don't understand, and that seemed to be relatively normal the way I was brought up, that you're going to read something and it doesn't, even if you translate it into English. When I was brought up, it usually didn't make too much sense. It wasn't an English that we would normally use, but that's how it was. But we can understand it. It takes a lot of time, and I'm going to talk about 2 different lines to explain a little bit of the background. It is similar to, for example, if someone were to say that somebody traveled from the Big Apple to the Windy City, a lot of people would understand in this room what he was talking about, and a lot of people wouldn't have a clue. You can look it up and you can find out, okay, the Big Apple is New York, the Windy City is Chicago, but that still wouldn't explain why is it called New York, or why is New York called the Big Apple, and why is Chicago called the Windy City. And that sometimes happens in the Kinos, that you can understand that a particular phrase means the Torah or means Moshe, but you don't necessarily understand what was going on in the background for that. So the first phrase I want to talk about is about 6 lines down. Kenerag Kohen v'Navi b'Yom HaKippurim. When a Kohen, who was also a Navi, was killed on Yom Kippur. And then on that, it talks about the vengeance of the blood, doing Nakama on that. What are we talking about? So if you have an art scroll, you'll see, okay, that's talking about the Zechariah. Wonderful. Now, what happened? What happens in the Zechariah? There's it happens to be a Kina that describes a bit in detail, and that's 34. But in this Kina, it doesn't go into any detail. What happened was that Zechariah on Yom Kippur was trying to give Tuchacha to the king. The king at the time was the king Yoash. Didn't appreciate it, and on Yom Kippur he had Zechariah killed. In the Beis of Mikdash on Yom Kippur, which was also Shabbos, it was not a good thing. Not a good thing. It was, to read that this happened is just unbelievable, but it happened, and there he was in the Beis of Mikdash, and his blood was spilled all over the place. They tried to cover up the blood, and the blood would not allow itself to be covered. It was bubbling on the floor of the Beis of Mikdash, and it bubbled for approximately 250 years thereafter, and it stayed on the floor. And so throughout the whole first Beis of Mikdash, that blood was there until Nebuzaradan came, and he saw the blood boiling. And said, ooh, there's a whole Gemara in Gittin that describes what happens. And he saw the blood. What's the blood doing here? Oh, the Kohanim said, it's just blood from one of the sacrifices. And so Nebuzaradan was intrigued, and he had several animals sacrificed and tried to compare the blood. Nothing compared to it. Nothing was bubbling like that. And he said, if you don't tell me what happened, I'm going to rip your skin apart with iron combs. So they admitted that there was a prophet, and we killed him on Yom Kippur. So Nebuzaradan took it upon himself to avenge his blood, and he started killing people. And he brought brought the judges from the Sanhedrin, and he killed them. And he brought youths and maidens, and he slew them. And he brought in the blood was still bubbling on the floor of the Beis Mikdash. And he brought school children and killed all of them. I think the number was 940,000 people that he killed altogether, until he said, cried out, Zechariah, what do you want? I should kill everybody? At that point, the blood stopped bubbling. And as a side point, he happened to think of Nevuza Radin, thought about what he had just done, how many people he killed to avenge the blood of one person, and he himself decided to convert to Judaism. That's one line in the Kinah to understand what just happened there, the whole background. There's another line towards the end. This is in the first Shin, where it talks about V'nisrafa das marom shivuya. So Nisrafa, when it was burnt, the das, something to do with religion, marom of up high, shivuya, that was captured. So what is that talking about? And so we can say that it was, you can look in your art scroll, you can see they're talking about the Torah. So why is the Torah called something that was captured from up high? And for that, we have to go to Gemara and Shabbos, which is something that you may have heard about this before. When Moshe was on Har Sinai, he went up to Shemayim, and he was going to now bring down the Torah. The Malachim were not so happy about that it was their Torah. They felt that man was not on a high enough level to take it. And so there was a back and forth where Hashem said to Moshe, okay, you go prove yourself. Tell the angels, tell the Malachim why you should have the Torah. And so he started quoting from the Torah and said, it says that you were freed from Mitzrayim. You, Malachim, were you freed from Mitzrayim? It says you should not worship other gods. Do you, Malachim, live with other nations where they worship other gods? That you're tempted for this. It says keep the Sabbath. Do you, Malachim, do any malacha during the week that you have to now refrain from doing malacha on Shabbat? So he went through all these things and eventually was able to bring the Torah down, and that's why he's called over here someone who has captured something that was captured as shivuya. He brought it down, he captured it from the Malachim. So this Kinah is 24 verses corresponding to 24 shifts of the Kohanim. We went through just 2 items, and they all are just as complicated, just as deep. Rabbi Kaganoff writes about how this is the piyutim are something that requires studying rather than reading. We're going to do the best we can, and we'll read it if you have a translation or whatever. I can't do it without a translation to help me along, and we're going to start with this Kinah number 10.